Some things that happened in American schools during the 1950s and the 1960s sound so bizarre that people assume they are exaggerated. They are not. These were real policies practiced daily in schools across the country. Here are 5 traditions that disappeared so completely most people have no idea they ever existed. Number 1. Ink pen licenses. In the 1950s and into the 1960s, American elementary school students were not allowed to write with ink pens. Not as a suggestion, as a rule. Pencils were the only acceptable writing tool until a student earned the formal privilege of using a pen by demonstrating sufficient penmanship skill, neatness, and overall classroom behavior. The transition from pencil to pen was treated as a milestone, a rite of passage that schools managed with genuine bureaucratic seriousness. Some districts issued actual certificates or licenses that authorized the student to use ink. Others required a teacher's written recommendation. The logic was rooted in the era's writing technology. Fountain pens and early ballpoints were messy in untrained hands. Ink smeared, blotted, and stained paper in ways that pencils did not, and mistakes could not be erased. A student who had not demonstrated control over letter formation, spacing, and pressure was considered a risk to their own work and to the school's standards of presentation. Teachers framed the pen as something to be earned, not given, and students who received their pen privilege early wore it as a badge of status. Students who were denied it felt the sting of being visibly behind their peers, still writing in pencil while classmates had graduated to ink. The system created a hierarchy out of a writing instrument, turning a basic school supply into a reward that children competed for. It faded through the 1960s as ballpoint pens became cheap and universal, and the idea that a child needed permission to use one started to feel as outdated as the fountain pens that created the policy. But for a generation of students, the day they earned their pen license was a day they remembered. Number 2. Warm milk in glass bottles. Every morning in schools across America during the 1950s and 1960s, small glass bottles of milk were delivered to classrooms and placed on student desks or on a table near the door. The milk arrived cold, usually from a local dairy, in those iconic half-pint glass bottles sealed with a paper cap that you pushed in with your thumb. The program was part of a federal initiative to ensure children received adequate nutrition, and for many students, it was the only guaranteed source of calcium in their diet. The problem was temperature. There was no refrigeration in classrooms. The bottles sat on desks or windowsills through the morning, warming steadily as the hours passed. By mid-morning, the milk was lukewarm. By lunch, it was room temperature and often developing that unmistakable sour edge that meant the bacteria were winning. In warmer months and in southern states, the milk could turn genuinely bad before anyone drank it. Students were expected to drink it anyway. Some teachers enforced consumption the way they enforced everything else, with the expectation that what was given would be consumed without complaint. Children who gagged on warm, turning milk were told to finish it because waste was unacceptable and nutrition was not optional. The glass bottles themselves created their own issues. They broke when dropped, leaving shards on classroom floors. They were heavy for small hands, and they had to be collected, washed, and returned daily. The program transitioned to waxed paper cartons and eventually to today's plastic-wrapped options. The glass bottle disappeared, and with it, the particular memory of pressing your thumb through a paper cap and hoping today's milk had not been sitting in the sun too long. Number 3. Penmanship graded like math. In the 1950s and 1960s, handwriting was not a casual skill teachers mentioned in passing. It was a standalone subject on the report card, graded with the same weight and seriousness as mathematics, reading, or science. Students spent dedicated class periods practicing letter formation, slant consistency, spacing between words, and the controlled pressure required to produce clean, uniform script. The dominant system was the Palmer method, a cursive style characterized by rhythmic arm movements and specific letter forms that students drilled through repetitive exercises, filling pages with loops and ovals before ever writing a word. A student who excelled in math but produced messy handwriting received a report card that reflected both. Teachers displayed exemplary work on classroom walls, and students who did not meet the standard received extra assignments and pointed commentary. The subject consumed significant instructional time, hours per week that modern schools would allocate to STEM or creative projects. The decline began in the 1970s as typewriters entered schools. Today, many states have removed cursive from their curriculum entirely. A student can graduate without ever being graded on the shape of a letter. In the 1950s, the shape of your letters could determine whether you passed. Number 4. The nurse pulling teeth. The school nurse's office in the 1950s and 1960s was not the Band-Aid and ice pack station it is today. It was a medical facility operating at a level of intervention that would now require a licensed dental or medical professional, parental consent forms, and liability coverage. School nurses routinely extracted loose baby teeth from students. A child with a wiggly tooth was sent to the nurse, who assessed the tooth, gripped it with gauze or sometimes a pair of pliers from her desk drawer, and pulled it out. No anesthesia, no dental training in most cases, no parental phone call beforehand. The child walked in with a loose tooth and walked out with a gap, a piece of gauze to bite on, and instructions to swallow any blood rather than spit in the hallway. For many children, especially those from families without access to regular dental care, the school nurse was the only person who ever addressed their dental health. Some nurses went beyond loose teeth. They applied fluoride treatments, identified cavities, and made referrals, functioning as a first-line dental service the school system had not formally authorized but relied upon. The practice was rooted in an era when professional boundaries in schools barely existed. The nurse handled whatever walked through her door. The legal framework that now governs school health services, requiring parental consent for any procedure beyond basic first aid, did not exist. The nurse's judgment was the only standard. Today, a school nurse who extracted a child's tooth without parental authorization and without dental licensure would face termination and potential criminal charges for practicing dentistry without a license. In the 1950s, she got a thank you note from the mother and a drawing from the kid. Number 5. Report cards delivered to your door. Before email, before parent portals, before sealed envelopes sent home in backpacks, there was the home visit. In many American school districts during the 1950s and into the 1960s, teachers personally delivered report cards to each student's home. The teacher drove or walked to the family's house, knocked on the door, sat down with the parents, and reviewed the child's grades, behavior, and progress face to face. The child was usually present, standing nearby while an adult they spent all day with described their performance to the adults they spent all night with. There was nowhere to hide. A bad grade was not a piece of paper you could intercept from the mailbox. It was a conversation happening in your living room with you standing right there. The system served multiple purposes beyond grade delivery. It gave teachers insight into a student's home environment and family dynamics. It built relationships that extended beyond the transactional. And it gave parents who could not visit the school a direct connection to the person responsible for their child's education. The practice required enormous time. A class of 30 meant 30 home visits, each requiring travel and conversation. It was exhausting and logistically unsustainable as class sizes grew. The home visit declined through the 1960s and the 1970s, replaced first by mailed report cards and parent-teacher conference nights, then by the digital communication systems that now deliver a child's grades to a parent's phone in real time. The personal connection disappeared. So did the terror of watching your teacher sit down on your family's couch and open a folder with your name on it. If these sounded too strange to be real, they were all real, and there is more where they came from. Hit subscribe and leave a like so we can keep digging up the school history nobody talks about.